we have always had this political hostility, et cetera, et cetera. It's just magnified now because of social media and actors and players and politicians. And politicians essentially are thin-skinned. More so, I mean, even though they shouldn't be because it's a hard business to be in, they don't like bad things being said about them. And as a result, I think principle goes out the door.
Yeah,
and that's unfortunate.
I think it's something that we really need to be on guard for.
We just can't. We have to stand by certain things. And envy is the other problem. You know, you look at the philanthropic community, groups on their left, groups on their right. There's a lot of money in philanthropy. There's a lot of money in left-leaning philanthropy. That's a true statement. Back to our earlier conversation. So careful how we play with that at the risk of hurting ourselves. When those dollars are there and you're trying to raise this, well, maybe you can try to shame a few donors and get money your way, and that's just not the way to go about it.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Hey everyone, welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. We're out and about, recording from the State Policy Network annual meeting. SPN is all about helping state organizations put free market ideas and local solutions into practice. The best part? We get to talk with the people all around the country to hear what they're doing in their communities. Now, in order for a lot of these organizations to operate, they rely on donors to help keep the doors open. But recently, there have been efforts across the country to roll back donor privacy protections. If we look back at the civil rights era, states tried to expose donors so that to intimidation and harassment to try to defund the NAACP. This is an issue that has made it all the way to the Supreme Court on multiple occasions, and they have continued to make it clear that this is protected free speech and donor privacy should be protected. So that's why today we're talking with Lawson Bader, President and CEO of DonorsTrust, about this important issue. Lawson, welcome.
Glad to be here.
So, CEO of DonorsTrust.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe can you talk to us about what DonorsTrust does and you know, what do you busy yourself with?
Yeah. So DonorsTrust was started 26 years ago, really to do two things. And 26 years later, we're doing the same thing. So one is preserve the charitable intent of self-identified conservative libertarian donors during their lifetime and afterwards. And we can steward that many different ways. Number two, and it's actually a secondary, but it's still important to number one, is make sure that there are resources going to organizations that are in some way defending, promoting limited government, personal responsibility, free enterprise. That doesn't mean all of our grants do that, but anyway, but we use a donor advised fund as the tool with which we do that. We have other programs too, but that's our primary purpose. So,
why do you think the service you provide is important?
Couple reasons. Donor advised funds themselves are relatively simple tools. They're not necessarily ones just to be used by the wealthy. So we talk about the democratizing of philanthropy by DAFs. Anybody can use a DAF. They're not terribly expensive. They're easier, tax friendly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the technical reason. But the philosophical reason is really we've seen since the great sort of 20th century foundations of Ford, Rockefeller, Pew, MacArthur, which began in some sort of conservative idea, or at least the money was built by, conservative free market entrepreneurial ideas. And
seems so foreign at this point in time now.
It's a strange concept, but we've seen that money just do the opposite.
Right.
And then there's also the sort of the modern shift in the policy world where organizations that aren't explicitly sort of conservative free market in their grounding do over time drift. So we're faced with this incredible challenge of generational wealth going to causes and ideas and things that are inherently opposite of what we wanted. So to try to create a mechanism to sort of steward that, to sequester those funds, if you will, to ensure that revenue stream and to protect, mom and dad and grandma and grandpa who maybe love their children. They're going to help them with the house and maybe the wedding, but maybe they differ in some values, and why should their well-earned dollars of whatever amount go to causes that are against their principles?
Yeah.
So that's really it's a bad reason. It's a good antidote, but it's unfortunate that we have to have it in that way.
I mean, having interacted with a lot of donors over the course of time, that's a very real reality. So It's more the rule rather than the
Exactly. In
exception.
fact, I think I just saw in Chronicle of Philanthropy a year or so, actually it might have been this year, where they ranked by assets, sort of private foundations around the country. And, the first two were Gates and whatnot, and they were billions ahead of number 3, 4, 5, et cetera. It was not until number 112 that you sort of reached your first overtly conservative foundation. It was Abby and Diana Davis Spencer. And then you had sort of Daniels, you had a little bit of, the Koch Foundation was in there, but you're still talking 112, 130th, 150th.
Wow.
And then on to 200, and that was about it. So it just shows you the vast amount of resources. Now, to be fair, not every organization on that list is an ideological issue, but it was certainly not explicitly in our way.
Yeah.
So it's an uphill battle. So we need to protect what we have.
So maybe tell us about like your pathway to running DonorsTrust. I mean, we share a common college experience, both Wheaton College grads. Proud.
Which I can't talk about all experiences because I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement in 1988. So.
I was potentially I shouldn't tell the story for recording, but before my senior year, we were at like a little fair thing where like people like are looking at different things, clubs they can be in and all that. And I was standing next to the dean of men. And I looked at him and I introduced myself and he was like, "Oh, hi, yeah, nice to meet you." And I was like, "Yes." Doesn't know who I am.
Yeah, this is good.
I thought it was very accomplished.
That's
there.
right. I think I managed to avoid for all 4 years the dean of students.
Yeah.
I did not avoid said dean of students my senior year. And it was not a get to know you conversation. It was I can't believe you're still here and I'm not sure I want you to be in a few months, but that's all right.
Great.
I also arrived on campus my first day wearing a Coors hat.
Nice.
Yeah. So
I actually used to play in intramural football with a big black Jack Daniels shirt on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like,
thought I was such the rebel.
Going to be who I am. Although it's sort of part of your question as to the wow. So to understand my crazy background, so I am a walking example of a bicoastal elitist. So I was born in Washington, D.C. And I mean in Washington, D.C. Not this, I live in D.C., but I really live in Virginia.
Yep.
Was there for a while. Then I moved to San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
And more or less grew up in the Bay Area.
Wow.
North of the Golden Gate Bridge in a county called Marin County, which is not known for any kind of conservatarian. It's got libertarian in there, I'll give you that. But anyway, but it was actually that experience, which is part of the answer to the question. So really two things happened in the 80s. One is living in what was becoming an increasingly wealthy area. That's not a surprise. But frankly, seeing the hypocrisy of people who had every opportunity and means to purchase land that they'd like to protect to do whatever, create the museum to do whatever, but instead we're getting essentially the taxpayers to do things. And I found the hypocrisy of that maddening. And it was a very progressive and very wealthy, and that just drove me nuts. At the same time, I'm a child of the Cold War, and I was fortunate to be overseas 5 or 6, 7 times. And I was in East Germany multiple times, and I was in Romania and Bulgaria and Poland and Czechoslovakia when it was called Czechoslovakia. I was an exchange student in West Germany. And when you are experiencing the first time seeing the wall and the border and the horror of that, that leaves a pretty stark impression. I can remember being 16 years old and seeing my first time walking through this incredibly lovely forest with my German parents and emerging into what I just described as a nightmare. And that whole idea of no institution should control the human conscience. I don't care if it's public or private. And no economic system is as adverse to human flourishing as the one that tries to destroy your innate sense of purpose. And that is what sort of made me ideologically what I was. But I didn't really look at that as a vocation per se. It was just a calling, and I knew I wanted to be back in D.C., and I like politics and history and all that. So the first 6, 7 years of my career was working on the Hill and all those sort of typical things. And it was actually David Knott, who is now the president of Reason Foundation, was at the time the president of the Institute for Humane Studies, and this little organization called the Center for the Study of Market Processes. And long story short, a mutual friend of ours said, "Oh, you guys really should get to know each other." And finally, as a favor, we got together for lunch, turned into a 3-hour conversation. 2 months later, I'm the 5th person hired by the Center for Market Processes, which went on to become the Mercatus Center.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
And so there were
Okay.
5 of us that sort of were the pathway to
Wow.
developing that, growing that. And I was there 16 years running all kinds of programs and fundraising.
You're a Mercatus OG.
We'd literally sit around the table. And this is out in Fairfax before we moved to Arlington. We sit in Fairfax, we look at each other. It's like, well, what do you want to do today? I don't know. Let's try this. Let's try that. And it was mostly an outreach effort, teaching economics to Capitol Hill staff. Anyway, did that. Became the president of the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I replaced the immortal Fred Smith in that transition. And I was planning on doing that for a long time. And long story short is Whitney Ball, who was the co-founder of DonorsTrust, who was a friend of mine and had been for a while, as well as I was a grantee of DonorsTrust. And Kim Dennis, who was still the chair, was the other co-founder. Whitney had developed breast cancer, and unfortunately, it was going to not end well. And over a weekend, it sort of came out that she wanted me to do this, and you don't really say no to something like that. So took a few months to untangle and unravel, and so I didn't really seek to be the head of DonorsTrust, to be honest. But now that I've been there 10, 11 years, it's a nice nexus between the donor community and, frankly, the ones who are engaged in this process that I'm sensitive to, familiar with. I understand their DNA, and we kind of sit in the middle of this. So,
well, one of the things that is kind of central to what you guys are doing is issues around freedom of speech and charitable philanthropic giving. So can you talk about like what role you play and just generally like where you think we're at as a nation?
No, it's a really good question because, people read the Constitution, they read the Declaration. Free speech is that phrase that we all use. And I think more and more people think, oh, I'm just standing up saying what my mind is in a various situation, or the whole, are you in the crowded theater? Are you not the crowded theater? Is it on fire? All of that. That's all true. And that's an expression, but we actually look at it from the standpoint of philanthropic freedom, which is fundamentally what we are defending, is an inherent part of that free expression. And the way we describe it is if you listen to that opening line of the Declaration, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and government securing rights and all of that, the way we view it is that philanthropic freedom is you are going to pursue your life, liberty, and happiness with your time, your talent, your treasure, in whatever pursuit that is. And in the process of pursuing that, you will hopefully gain benefit for yourself, but you will also gain benefit for others. But that doesn't mean you're all on the same page. And the idea behind that is you're pursuing that to solve problems, address an issue, because it's not the role of the government to do it, because there's an inherent sense of government being limited. So there's this metaphorical wall around government saying, hey, you citizens, you do it, you address this, you fix that, you try that. And if we can be helpful, great, but that's your job. And it can be messy and you can be in conflict, but that's kind of the robust civil society. If we start to restrict your and my ability to time, talent, and treasure, that metaphorical wall shifts to be around the citizen. And now it's the government doing everything, et cetera. And we've lost that innate sense of worth and value, which is not how the founders envisioned that.
No.
And so what we do, we view as an extension of freedom. And that includes the George Soros of the world. Who they want to give money to who they want to, then that's their right. We have to fight them not by attacking the donors. We fight them by attacking the institutions and the principles and ideas and being creative, but don't use that pressure, because that is what the left has been doing to the right for 35 years. And I'm not a fan of just pushing it back. It's like, no, all philanthropic freedom is good. We got to protect that, period. Fight them in a different way.
Right. It's always so interesting to me because when we work on these issues or are confronted with them, often have to litigate them.
Yeah.
So the groups that join together with us, if we're doing it, are so diverse.
Yes.
Because a lot of the law was really, you didn't know better than I am, but was really formulated around the civil rights movement because people couldn't speak out without fear of retribution.
Correct.
And so, I think a lot of us would agree that was a very appropriate thing to do.
There's a very famous Supreme Court case came out of the 60s, which was Alabama, went after the NAACP because the NAACP is obviously at work in Alabama, and the state says, hey, you want to do work here, we need to know your donors. Really? In 1960s in Alabama, that's not a good idea. All the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court very clearly in a 9-0 majority said, no, you do not have the right to their donors. Fight them another way. That's a pretty sacrosanct principle, and that has been upheld ever since.
Well, one of the more recent cases involved Americans for Prosperity Foundation.
I was going to say, that was my softball opportunity for you.
No,
there you go.
I mean, it was a historic case that reaffirmed California, originally Kamala Harris as the Attorney General.
Originally Kamala Harris.
I mean, under such...
all those unfortunate leaks.
Yeah, well, that was it. I mean, and it actually, the courts really, that resonated with them, is that when government collects this private data, it doesn't just stay under lock and key. It often finds its way to the opponents of the people who have it, or the media and all that. And we've seen that time and again. And that was one of the considerations that the court took into account.
Exactly right.
Really made a good rule, a good affirmation that privacy, people's privacy as donors is
privacy.
Important.
There's a organization that deals with this. It talks about transparency is for government and privacy is for citizens. That's a pretty important, we cannot violate that, or we change that relationship, as I said, between citizen and state in a detrimental way.
What do you see as kind of the next steps or the next fights in this space around donor privacy?
Well, it's interesting. Here we are at State Policy Network, which is obviously, its primary focus is federalism. The donor privacy issue oftentimes is a state issue, not so much a federal issue. I think we've maybe solved some things, although it may be still whack-a-mole. But we see at the state level, Republicans and Democrats, whether it's legislature or governor, who don't like being criticized by state think tank X. So now it becomes, well, how can we either make it difficult for you to testify without revealing your donors above a certain amount, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's more opportunity to protect that at the state level, but we're also seeing the negative as well. And so SPN's been very engaged in that. And so that's where I see that's kind of the negative. The flip side is there is such an energy right now into federalism. Ironically, the Democrats have suddenly discovered federalism. It's like, it's never gone away. It's kind of been there since the founding. It's the idea. It's why it's called a republic, United States of America. But whether you're looking at, Washington has limited authority, period. The states actually have less limited authority under the Constitution to experiment, because we are essentially governed almost on a daily basis by state and local rules, not necessarily by federal rules. And so to have this laboratories of democracy push things up, school choice being a state issue, all of that, that's really where the energy is. And I see donors, frankly, not that they're shifting away from sort of DC-centric organizations that matter to those state, creative, parent-run, et cetera, C4s, the whole space. That's where the energy is right now. And I think that's a good thing.
I agree. I think it's a good thing. As a state-based national organization, we agree with that too.
No, it's but I think the growth of SPN's network over the years reflects that energy. Without taking away anything from, the DC groups that are involved in this space too.
One of the things I think that is scary is what we do see Republican governors, Republican legislators sometimes introducing laws that would really curtail or do away with donor privacy in some cases. And I think the unfortunate thing is it's almost like a lack of belief in the fundamental freedom. It's like, well, the left was trying to do that to us, so now I'm going to overcorrect and try to do it to them.
Yes.
And it's like two wrongs don't make the right. I mean,
no, it's an attitude of retribution. Which is unfortunately a political. I mean, we are fallen human beings, and we go back to, you think John Adams and Thomas Jefferson liked each other? No. I mean, there were duels in Congress. Now, bringing a duel back might be an interesting idea to watch in this day and age. I'm not suggesting it nor endorsing it, but it would be entertaining. So, we have always had this political hostility, et cetera, et cetera. It's just magnified now because of social media and actors and players and politicians. So, and politicians essentially are thin-skinned. More so, I mean, even though they shouldn't be, because it's a hard business to be in, they don't like bad things being said about them. And as a result, I think principle goes out the door.
Yeah,
and that's unfortunate.
I think it's something that we really need to be on guard for.
We have to stand by certain things. And envy is the other problem. You look at the philanthropic community, groups on the left, groups on the right. There's a lot of money in philanthropy. There's a lot of money in left-leaning philanthropy. That's a true statement back to our earlier conversation. So careful how we play with that at the risk of hurting ourselves. And there's a when those dollars are there and you're trying to raise this, well, maybe you can try to shame a few donors and get money your way, and that's just not the way to go about it. So
no. Well, I appreciate that you're making the world a little safer for all of us, at least the country.
Surviving every day.
Yeah. Those of us who are paid via donor contributions in our organization.
You know what, though?
Really
but that's actually,
it.
I mean, I talk about this all the time. What I have done for the vast majority of my career, I do with other people's money. You work for a foundation, unless you made it, you're working with other people's money.
Yep.
And that is not something we should ever forget in this business, which makes us more accountable and more responsible, and puts pressure on each of us, whether it's brand new staffer to an organization to the CEO. It's like, you believe in the market process, write a check to your own organization. At CEI, I used to tell my giving managers, it's like, look, a successful meeting is not one necessarily that comes back with a check. A successful meeting is what comes back and you have voluntarily told that donor at least one or two other organizations doing good work, because you're solving a problem for them, which is, where do I put my dollars? But you're making sure their dollars are the ones that matter, and spread it around, because that's what the collaborative aspect of this whole thing is. So go for it.
Well, I know that last year, I think you told me that you and your son won the trivia contest here.
It's very important.
I hear that's starting up.
There's
in the background. I'm sure you're itching, waiting to get over there. Otherwise, you're just going to start yelling out answers.
We're going to start yelling answers and think we have a very strange Tourette syndrome problem, with all due respect to those with Tourette syndrome.
Very respectful Tourette.
But it'll make it a very interesting conversation.
All right. Well, Lawson Bader, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
Appreciate it. Hope the SBN conference continues to be great for you.
And for you.
Thanks. So if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.